cliffs with thousands of tombs drilled directly into vertical rock walls. A mud fortress that outlived empires for over 5,000 years. A hill revealed multiple lost cities, buried layers deep over millennia. These ancient sites weren't built with modern cranes or power tools. Yet ancient people moved massive materials, carving durable structures from solid stone. We'll explore some of the most physically unbelievable ancient structures ever discovered.
More than 5,000 tombs were carved directly into these cliffs. Ancient people created all of them by hand.
The necropolis of Pantalica stretches across steep, rocky canyons in Sicily. Entire cliff faces are covered with small, dark openings cut into solid stone. From a distance, the landscape almost doesn't look real. The tombs climb across the cliffs in huge layers, stacked one after another so densely. Parts of the canyon walls look completely covered in man-made carvings. The terrain makes the site even harder to understand. These tombs weren't carved into soft ground. They were cut directly into high rocky cliffs using ancient tools, long before modern drilling equipment. People had to climb dangerous canyon walls and carve into solid rock by hand. Repeating the process thousands of times across the entire valley. The scale of labor becomes almost impossible to imagine. This wasn't a small burial site. It became one of the largest ancient necropolises ever created in Europe. Archaeologists still debate how such a massive project was organized in terrain this difficult. Some tombs sit so high above the canyon floor that reaching them now requires careful climbing. Ancient builders carved clean openings, burial chambers, and pathways across cliffs without modern safety equipment or machinery. When sunlight hits the canyon at the right angle, the entire landscape changes. Thousands of dark stone openings become visible, stretching across the cliffs in every direction. The full scale of Pantalica becomes clear. You're not looking at isolated tombs. You're looking at an entire civilization carving itself directly into the mountainside, one chamber at a time. Imagine a giant fortress rising from the Egyptian desert, built over 5,000 years ago using only mud bricks. That's what makes Shunet el Zabib so hard to believe. The structure is massive, with huge enclosure walls stretching across the desert, surrounding a giant rectangular complex that still looks intimidating even after thousands of years of damage. Some sections of the walls remain several meters high, despite non-stop exposure to desert heat and erosion. Despite collapsing terrain and sandstorms for over 50 centuries. This wasn't built from carved stone blocks like later Egyptian monuments. This entire structure was built from mud brick. Mud brick normally breaks apart over time. Most mud brick structures from ancient history collapsed long ago, but Shunet el Zabib survived. When archaeologists studied the site, the engineering became even more impressive. The layout was carefully planned, with huge outer walls, organized internal spaces, and controlled entrances. Large, open courtyards show a level of coordination not usually associated with such an early stage of civilization. The scale alone creates problems. Every single brick had to be made by hand. Workers had to shape the mud, dry it under the sun, and transport it across the desert. then stack it into walls thick enough to support a gigantic enclosure.
Without cranes, machinery, or modern construction tools. That's why the site feels so strange today.
The structure looks far more advanced than what most people imagine Egypt before the pyramids was capable.
For over 4,000 years, people kept rebuilding on this exact same spot, again and again, until the ground itself turned into a giant artificial hill from the remains of entire civilizations. That hill became a magnificent ancient fortress. At first glance, it looks like a normal fortress rising above the desert.
Underneath are layers of buried cities, stacked on top of each other, across thousands of years of human occupation.
That's what makes the site so difficult to process. Archaeologists didn't just find one ancient settlement here.
They found the remains of many different periods of civilization compressed into the same location. Over centuries of rebuilding, the deeper excavations went, the older the structures became.
Ancient walls, roads, storage areas, defensive structures, and forgotten settlements buried beneath newer ones. Somehow, this location remained important for thousands of years straight.
The scale of construction is what stands out most.
Huge stone fortifications, thick defensive walls, elevated structures, and carefully planned layouts were built.
In an environment exposed to extreme desert heat and coastal conditions for centuries. The site wasn't isolated. Qalat al-Bahrain sat near major trade routes connecting powerful ancient regions. People, goods, and resources constantly moved through the area. This explains why civilizations kept rebuilding here. Most ancient temples in Indonesia look as expected: tall, detailed, symmetrical, and filled with refined stonework. Then there's Candi Suku. The moment people see it, the reaction is usually confusion. Instead of looking like a traditional Indonesian temple,
the structure looks like a giant stepped pyramid, built from rough volcanic stone on a mountainside.
The higher you go, the stranger it gets. Terraces rise in sharp geometric layers, with massive stone blocks stacked. Almost every part of the structure feels unusually raw compared to the polished architecture found across the region. This wasn't built recently. It was constructed during the 15th century, where transporting stone was a massive challenge.
No trucks, no modern roads through the mountains. Yet builders hauled enormous blocks uphill. Instead of looking like a traditional Indonesian temple, archaeologists examined the carvings, and suddenly the site became even more difficult to explain. Many figures and symbols looked completely different from the refined artwork usually found in Indonesian temples. Some carvings were so unusual that early researchers struggled to understand why a structure like this existed at all.
A fortress this massive was never supposed to survive centuries of collapse, but parts of Madar fortress ruins still do.
These once formed a heavily fortified stronghold, overlooking the surrounding landscape. Even in ruins, the scale still feels overwhelming. Some of the stone blocks used in the structure are so large. Moving them through rough mountainous terrain centuries ago would have been an enormous challenge. Builders didn't just move them. They shaped, lifted, reinforced, and assembled them into defensive walls. Designed to survive attacks, weather damage, and the weight of the structure itself over long periods.
That's the part that becomes difficult to process when walking through the site today.
Underneath are layers of buried cities, stacked on top of each other across thousands of years of human occupation, allowing defenders to monitor movement from long distances away. Even now, the location alone makes the structure feel intimidating. Despite centuries of invasions, erosion, earthquakes, and collapse, large parts of the original layout are still visible. Researchers noticed how heavily engineered many sections were. The labor required without modern equipment would have been enormous. Every stone section was transported manually across difficult terrain and precisely positioned using basic tools.
That's what makes Mador Fortress so fascinating. Builders created a defensive structure so massive and durable.
Even its ruins still dominate the mountains around it today.